Hi, this is Scott Wilkinson, host of Home Theater Geeks. In episode 367, I chat with Bob Schulein about his work in immersive audio for VR. So stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Home Theater Geeks is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson, recorded August 11th for August 17th, 2017. Episode 367, Immersive Audio for VR. Hey there, Scott Wilkinson here, the Home Theater Geek and editor of avsforum.com. This week's guest geek is Bob Schulein, founder of Immersive Technologies and an expert on immersive binaural audio. Hey, Bob, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Scott. Good to be with you again.
Always happy to have you here. Those who are watching live at live.twit.tv can post questions in the chat room, or you can go to irc.twit.tv. And if you post any questions in there, be sure to put my name, Scott Wilkinson, no dots or dashes or spaces, anywhere in the message, and then it'll show up on a different color on my screen. And if you have a question for Bob as we go, I'll pass along as many as I can. So, Bob, today we wanted to talk about immersive audio as it applies to, or how it can enhance VR, virtual reality. Now, how did you get interested in virtual reality?
Well, I think first I got interested in what I thought was entertainment, which was to produce a binaural musical experience with HD video. And then as time passed and I noticed what people were doing with what they were calling virtual reality, I said, I think they're thinking about the same thing I am. And then as I've continued to follow this, I see that there are various twists and turns on all of this. So I said, I guess I'm doing virtual reality, and let's look into this let's look into this deeper. And the deeper has really gotten me into more sophisticated video and more sophisticated audio technologies. And I guess you could say today it's a little unclear as to what one means exactly by virtual reality. I guess you could say since the early days of the motion picture, there's been this desire to have the audio and the video approach a more realistic experience, and particularly in the motion picture theater, we've seen widescreen and 3D and a number of things like that, and then multi-channel audio. So there's always been this drive to try to heighten the experience to people. And as the tools change, you can do more. And probably the latest type of thing that people have focused on has been something that you might call a virtual reality where you're wearing some kind of a headset. And that headset not only is providing audio, but providing a 3D video picture. And that's one example, and one thing that seems to be growing with things like the Oculus Rift and the Sony PlayStation and so forth.
Right, exactly. But it seems to me that for the most part, VR has been applied more to gaming than anything else. Would you agree?
Yes, that's been my observation. With a video game, there is this added feature that the game changes scenery. In other words, you're playing the game, you are moving through space, a building or what have you, and there is quite the opportunity to have the sound change as you go from one acoustical environment to the next. And that, I think, has spawned an interest in a audio product or an audio version that will change perspective as the player of the game controls the viewpoint. Now, the viewpoint of the player is usually something that's done while they're looking at a screen, and they're using some kind of a joystick controller. So there's not too much head motion involved because, you know, you've got to have your video available to you, so you don't look right or left.
In front of you, yeah.
Right, you don't look right or left because then you'd miss all the action, and that's not the idea.
Right, exactly. But more and more, I think we are starting to see perhaps some head tracking solutions that actually track your motion as you move your head around and change the perspective in that way.
Right.
So, you know, that's another way to do it, and I think it's kind of an up-and-coming way to do it.
Yeah, I would say if you go online and you look at people that are demonstrating like an Oculus Rift product, you usually see somebody that is in a sort of a free-form experience. They may have some kind of a hand controller they put in each hand, and they move around and they interact with their environment, and they move their head and they move through the room. There, it's much more important, if you want realism, to have the audio follow the new video perspective. And I see we've got some examples that Victor has put up here of things that people have been doing. So this,
you want to play those, or is this?
This can be a type of game, or it could be exploring something for educational purposes. I believe it didn't have audio, but several years ago, I can remember if you were looking for a new home, there was a 360 video type production involved. So you go into this home and you go into room A or B, and with your cursor, you can move around the room. So
right. I remember that.
That type of video has preceded the audio, and in that type of example, audio doesn't mean much because the house doesn't generate much entertainment value.
Well, true. I mean, I suppose you might want to know if the floors creak or if there's a train right behind the house or whatever. But,
right. They don't want you to know that until you move in.
They don't want you to know that, so they wouldn't tell you that anyway, right?
Right.
Well, yeah. I wanted to. Sorry, you wanted to finish your thought. Go ahead.
No, that sort of gives you some of the origin of the video, and then the likes of Oculus Rift had added a stereo picture. The home type deal was a 2D picture
on a computer.
When you add stereo or a 3D stereoscopic view, now you bring in a higher level of realism to improve the cognition of the whole experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about, I know that you're more interested in music, as I am, than playing video games, which I'm definitely not. But experiencing recorded music in a VR environment obviously is something of a different kettle of fish, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It brings up an issue that I've been thinking about and talking about for some time. It's been my observation, having been involved with audio and video for years, that in general, when it comes to entertainment, consumers don't want to work at being entertained. In other words, whatever it might be, video, audio, the combination, they want to sit back and enjoy it. Now, if you add the option that you can, let's say, move the picture by your head moving or a cursor, true, you can see different things. If you had a group of musicians that were spread out, you could see one, then the other, and so forth. And logically, you might want to hear what the audio sounds like if you have directed your attention to one versus another. But my feeling is this gets old pretty fast and is not really much in the way of entertainment. So I've steered away from that because I don't think it's something that has, as they say, much legs.
Right. Okay.
Even though you can do it. And I think you have some examples that I gave you on YouTube where people have used a microphone technique that we will talk about shortly, so that as you move the cursor, or if you have a head tracker and you move the view, not only does the, now here's an example. This is something that one can find by going to probably 360-degree ambisonic. And you'll see in this case, there's a, did you miss something there?
Oh, no. Go right ahead.
Yeah, 3D ambisonic. Ambisonic refers to the type of microphone used. Now, as we're moving the picture around, if we go continually to go to the right, you'll eventually see a drummer way over there. There you go, down a little bit. There's the drummer. And then if you do about a 180 from where you are, you will see a fellow playing the piano. And these three people are... And if you look straight down, you sort of see a fuzzy area where probably the 360 camera is. Now we have the piano player, and the audio that follows this is a form of binaural audio. And
we should say, by the way, we should say that if you're listening to this either live or in one of the video versions of our podcast, you will hear the binaural audio. But if you're listening to the audio, you're listening to the audio only MP3, that's in mono, and you will not hear this binaural effect. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
That's correct, and thanks for pointing that out, Scott. So this is one of a few examples, I haven't found too many, where the capture involved a 360 camera that saw everything at once, and a form of microphone that saw everything at once. And then in post-production, the two were married together such that you, the viewer, could steer the picture around and the audio would follow.
So in other words, if you put the saxophone behind you, you would hear it behind you. In fact, let's stop chatting for a minute and listen to the audio. Maybe start it again there, Victor. Or maybe not, because it looks like they're still playing. But let's hear the audio for just a little bit.
Yeah.
And then move the perspective around there, Victor. Yeah.
Yeah. Should be a frontal piano now.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, from a recording engineering's perspective, engineer's perspective, this microphone technique is distant, basically, from all the instruments. This is not what we're used to hearing when we record music like this. And even though there's the ability to do some touch-up mics, as they say, and put those in spatially, it becomes quite an audio production challenge to make this sound like what people are used to listening to. So to me, this is very interesting, but sort of a novel. And once you've heard one of these, it's okay. Now I've heard it. Now what do I do? But you're more really interested in enjoying the music with hopefully the best audio perspective. And that's what I've been all about. And we have examples of that sort of thing that we can look at as the program progresses.
Exactly, which we shall do precisely right. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about your feeling on head tracking and perspective. As we just heard, you can move, that's a 360 video on YouTube. You can move the perspective around. The sound moves with you. You've said that you don't think that's all that interesting, at least in the long term. So maybe we don't even need that when we're talking about recording musical performances for VR with immersive audio. We're going to talk about binaural audio here in a minute, but first of all, your perspective on head tracking or changing perspective. Do we really need that,
right.
you think?
Right. Let me start with the positive side. If you're doing a video game type operation and you're going to wear a head tracker, or let's say you're doing something with Oculus Rift, that type of product, and you have head tracking, it's important. Otherwise, you're going to lose the change in audio and acoustic perspective. That's one example. Now, if I'm watching, let's say, an immersive recording of a group in which I have established my camera shots and so forth, and we're not particularly interested in what's going on behind everybody. Now, this is where I have my questions as to the real value of head tracking. Now, people will say that have done some experiments that head tracking has benefits regarding internalization versus externalization, meaning that the binaural audio image that you're hearing collapses into your head if you don't have head tracking. I haven't found that to be the case, but that's one of the arguments. So the other thing is, and I think we can all remember situations. If you're in an unknown space, say a restaurant or something, and there's a sound that goes on around you, without seeing it or without some sort of exploration, it's ambiguous as to where the sound is. Now, if you use head tracking, your head, and move it, that will help you disambiguate the situation to where you can figure out where things are coming from. But in my view, if you're doing the type of immersive entertainment experience that I like to work with, the video tells you where everything is, or it tells you where things aren't. For example, we have a clip that we may get to where there's I'm walking around a mannequin, but there's an airplane flying overhead. You don't see the airplane, you hear the sound of the airplane, you know what an airplane sounds like, it goes over your head. So, and then some researchers that I've talked to, one, this is anecdotal, of course, that was doing some experiments with head tracking audio. I asked the person, what was the most interesting thing you learned in doing this? And one of them was, I couldn't get people to move their heads because they were so interested in looking at what the object was. So I think the disambiguation of the sound field is one of the benefits of such. And I don't want to talk like I've done a whole bunch of this, because I haven't, but I've done a lot of reading and experiments where I've made actual binaural recordings with microphones in people's ears, in a scene. We'll be in a restaurant or a bar, and we'll record 10, 15 minutes of them talking and interacting. and then you play it back right away. Oh, I see he's got things loaded up here. This we might want to pause and restart, but this is the me moving around in my backyard with a mannequin.
Oh,
so
yeah, you mentioned that a little bit earlier.
Right, I should probably introduce this. There we go.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah, everybody should listen to this with earphones, and then we'll comment on it after it finishes. It doesn't last very long.
Okay.
Hello, these will be some binaural tests. The mannequin now is matching my height. I'm probably about 1 meter away. I'm talking on axis. I'm going to slowly walk around the mannequin, and you can see where I am, but I'll also point out the position. So we're on axis, and we're going to move toward the left ear. 7777, 7777. She sells seashells by the seashore. 7777, 7777. She sells seashells by the seashore. 7777. She sells seashells by the seashore. Now I'm directly on the left ear, moving toward the back. 7777. She sells seashells by the seashore. 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 Now I'm directly behind, moving now toward the right ear. 7777. She sells seashells by the seashore.
So,
okay.
If you're listening in stereo to one of the video podcasts or the live stream, you should be able to hear Bob moving around that mannequin. And the mannequin is important. It's a form of a binaural microphone, and we haven't really delved into that whole topic yet, and this may very well be a good time to do it.
Right. I just wanted to make one comment, though, to your listeners and viewers. I've done this particular experiment many times, and in a recent lecture I gave on this, I noticed that some percentage, maybe 10% of the listeners, would find that they would hear an elevated image for part of the rotation. And after doing a little research into this, we must realize that the particular mannequin being used it looks like a real person, but it's not exactly you. And two differences between real people and these mannequins are the diameter of the head and the intricacies of the pinna. And these things,
which is the outer ear, the part of the ear that we normally call the ear.
That's right. So some of your listeners will hear a very natural motion. Some of them might hear the sound to be elevated. Some might hear the sound to come closer and further. And I think this is something we must accept if we're doing binaural recording with entertainment that is not completely individualized. And being completely individualized is probably impractical. So I just wanted to point that out. So let's continue with your question having to do with the mannequin.
Right, exactly. Basically, there are several different ways to capture immersive sound, the mannequin being one of them. And I want to take a look at graphics number 7, 8, and 9, because that way we can see some different approaches. So here's number 7. This shows us 3 different types of microphone arrangements for capturing an immersive sound field. Tell us what these are.
Okay, so the silhouette would be your musical group. The microphones that are set on top of them would be your traditional recording multi-track technique. We did mention Ambisonics, and that uses what's called a sound field microphone. That's on the left-hand side. The center has a binaural mannequin, and off to the right we have a product that is made by a company called Dissonance. different way to look at a sound field microphone. And there's also another one that I haven't put in there, which is made by M&H Acoustics, called the Eigenmic, which is similar in concept to that motion tracked binaural microphone, but has 32 omni elements in it, and enables producers to do more. So those are techniques for capture.
Right. And the binaural head or mannequin, I want to make sure everybody understands, has a head that is modeled after a sort of a quote-unquote average human head, but more particularly an average pair of pinna or outer ears. Correct. And there are microphones that are stuck in those ears, and those are what capture the sound with all of the diffraction and the acoustic effects of the pinna, which isn't, as you pointed out earlier, it's not exactly the same as yours or mine. In fact, pinnas are as individual as fingerprints, I believe. Yes. This is kind of an average. And so the effect is going to be more or less pronounced depending on the difference between these average pinnas, which are in this mannequin, and your particular pinnas that exist in your ears.
That is correct. And I'd say the key elements, if we switch to slide number 9.
Okay.
If we can find that. And you look at the left-hand side, this is some of the basics for the way I capture sound. The little gray object with the P2 pointing at it represents where the microphone is. And off to the right, there is a graph that has multiple plots in it. And that is showing all the components of the human body and the ear canal system that affect sound pressure level at P2, for example. And so it's important that there be a torso, that there be a head object, and there be a pinna. And capture techniques that don't use those have to suffer because of that, and have to find some ways of trying to make up for that when they do the final binaural realization.
Let's see here. We also had, I think, graphic number 8. Let's make sure we don't miss that one. That one is, okay, this is a little bit more about binaural head capture, and tell us about this.
That's sort of a refresher. The human detects where things are coming from using 2 types of cues. One is called the interaural time difference, meaning the arrival times of sound to the 2 ears, and the other is the interaural level difference, meaning the level difference between the 2 ears. So in the extreme, if somebody is talking into your right ear, it arrives there first. It's louder than at your left ear. And also there are some spectral differences, because the head, being an obstacle bigger than high-frequency wavelengths, will have a shielding effect on the spectrum of sound that reaches the ear on the other side of the talker. This goes back to Lord Rayleigh. People have known these things for some time.
Lord Rayleigh of the, I think his name is British. Lord Kelvin. Isn't that the same as Kelvin?
Well, you got me there, Scott. I'm not sure. I just know him as Lord.
I'll have to look that
Rayleigh.
up.
A British scientist that was around long before you and I, and was a pretty bright fellow.
Yeah. Yep, indeed. Before we get too far along here, I've got a number of questions in the chat room. The chat room is very active here on this, so if you'll bear with me, let me pose a couple questions here for you. One is many questions from JJ to the 4884. Can binaural audio reduce motion sickness with VR?
Well,
because you know that in VR sometimes you do get kind of queasy.
Yeah, I can't speak from experience, but I think the source of the motion sickness with virtual reality is that it's not normal, and you're moving your head around, and you're seeing this reproduced picture. I think we know many times we've noticed motion sickness if you're in a car trying to read, and your eyes are fixed
I get that.
the page.
I'm definitely susceptible to that, yeah.
Your eyes are fixed on the page, and the car is moving, so it's not normal. And I don't. My guess is that the moving image has more to do with the motion sickness than the binaural audio. But I think the question was, would it reduce it? And I don't know, frankly, but my guess is probably not.
Now, this does bring up a point that I wanted to make sure we made here, which is that of cognitive dissonance. This might be an argument for maybe it would reduce motion sickness. We have a graphic, number 6, that I wanted to show people about cognitive dissonance and how multiple senses contribute to the sense of reality, of being in a place, viewing something, hearing something, and so on. If we could take a look at graphic number 6, we could show sort of this idea diagrammed by you, and tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here.
Yeah. Now, the picture that I see may be cut off, but are the viewers seeing the whole slide? I don't know if we've zoomed in too much or not. In other words, on full cognition, you see the eye, the ear, etc. Maybe it's because
all 5 senses are working in. It could be, yeah.
Oh, it's my
screen
is too small. I fixed it. Yeah, you're right. Okay, so if anybody saw the movie, I think it was called, I want to say Brainwave, or it was a movie where somebody invented a machine where you put this thing on your head and you got the whole business. You got sound, sight, touch, etc. Excuse me. That gave you full cognition. That's what we're used to. But when it comes to any of these artificial realities or virtual realities or those types of things, we, by practical limitations, don't get all of those senses. So your ability to say to yourself, I really believe I'm there, is diminished. So what we're typically dealing with various types of virtual reality is a partial cognition dissonance, in that we've got sight and we've got sound. Now we make it better because it's 3D video and it's binaural audio, but you could have 2D video and non-motion tracked, or binaural audio that's not motion tracked. So, and then on the far right, we have audio only, which tends to be many of the ways that we enjoy audio entertainment. So I find this to be useful because when the brain doesn't get the full group of senses, it has to put something together itself. And that's where the dissonance comes in. An example of this dissonance that I find interesting is I've made binaural recordings of a person in a restaurant in which all we really captured was the binaural audio. Then we immediately played it back in the restaurant. And at that point, the individual was basically getting all the senses with the audio simply delayed. And invariably, the realism is tremendous. They're just dumbfounded. This is just amazing. But then if they take that same audio with them and they go home or to another environment at another time and they play it, they don't have anywhere near the same cognition. And to me, that's the fact that the brain, in the latter case, is having to make up all the things that the person was experiencing in, say, the restaurant. JJ
to the 4884 is also asking, how does immersive audio like Dolby Atmos or DTS:X fare in relation to binaural audio?
Okay, that's pretty straightforward. If we take those technologies, those are technologies that are primarily made for loudspeaker reproduction. Let's take Dolby Atmos, which gets discussed a lot. So it's a type of audio production that is object-based, as you've said on many of your shows, but the actual reproduction of the sound is through a multitude of speakers around the listener. Now, if you want to convert those signals for those X number of speakers to a headphone or a binaural experience, you are using a concept called binaural spatialization, where let's take any given loudspeaker with its attendant signal in that space. It is at a certain elevation and angle from you and distance, and knowing some generic head-related transfer functions for sounds at those locations, you can process that particular track and build up a complete audio binaural experience for that movie. And then if you add the picture to it, you can simulate quite accurately what you would have experienced if you had been in that theater. So this is just a different way of taking let's say, a multi-channel source that was made for speaker listening and converting it to a signal that you could listen to with headphones. And both DTS and Dolby over the years have offered those types of audio features.
And we're going to talk about speakers with binaural recordings as well, because it can work the other way as well.
Correct.
But before we do, Lawn Dog has a question: is it not still up to the audio engineer how all the effects around you are going to be blended, like audio levels being tweaked to enhance some effect, or the situation going on in the movie or the video presentation? How much control does an audio engineer have over a truly binaural captured recording, say from the mannequin head?
Oh, okay. Now we have to be careful with our terms here. If you're using a mannequin head, the binauralization and all the location elements are fixed by the nature of the head. And it should be thought of as a complete 360 experience. Doesn't matter where the sound is coming from. So what you do in post-production really doesn't change where things are coming from. You can change level, you can change the spectral content without disrupting the binaural spatialization, as long as you do the same thing to both channels. Because when you're listening, you as a listener are being exposed to interaural time and level differences, which creates that binaural experience.
But in a different type of capture, ambisonic in particular, you actually do have a little more control. In fact, we have graphics 10 and 11 I want to show people while you talk about that.
Yes, sir. We'll wait for the graphic to pop up here.
There it is.
In ambisonic capture, there are some basic elements, and we have to be careful not to get too long-winded here because of time. But you basically have what you might call a single-point microphone. That's shown on the left, and that has, in this case, 4 directional, first-order cardioid directional microphone elements, and they're arranged in a tetrahedron. Those 4 microphones, the output of those are captured and stored, and on the right, we show what can be generated from those. And one can generate from those 4 signals a bidirectional microphone aiming forward, to the left and right, up and down, and an omnidirectional pattern. Those are called the B format signals from the ambisonic mic. Once you have those, you're now ready to do your post-production and have some creation over what you hear. And
right. If we go to the next slide, we'll be able to see that, number 11.
Right. Yeah. Now, on the left-hand side of this slide, we show one of the virtues of the ambisonic process, and that is you can create in post different microphone patterns aimed in different directions from those 4 signals. So as an approximation, and this isn't exactly how everybody does it, but it gives you the idea. On the right-hand side, you could generate 2 cardioid pattern microphones aiming off to the left and off to the right, and feed those to a person and give a binaural-like sensation. And then as they turned their head, those 2 patterns could be made to rotate. And that you'd have to do with the synchronization between the head tracker and the, let's say, the post-processor for the ambisonic microphone. And the other microphones that we mentioned are somewhat different in the way they capture sound. That is the Dissonance mic and the Eigen mic. But the thing that's comparable to all of this is that in order to have the audio track as you move your head, you have to manipulate 4 or more signals that are representing these channels to agree with where the head is known to be now aimed. And that's a practical issue. One of which YouTube is taken care of. When we watch that early clip of the ambisonic microphone and rotated as the piano and saxophone and drummer were playing, there was behind-the-scenes processing done by YouTube to manipulate 4 signals so that you could get that binaural effect that would move. And that's yet to really be something available on consumer portable electronics, and that's a challenge. It's also a challenge for the Dissonic microphone and the Eigen microphone, and that could be a talk for another time.
Well, we do have a graphic about the Dissonic microphone, graphic number 12. I just wanted to show people that this is a slightly different approach. Tell us a little bit about what we're looking at here.
Right. So in the Dissonic microphone, there is a approximation to a head, and the approximation to the head is this oval spherical like or cylindrical with rounded top and bottom device that has pairs of microphones or a group of microphones, in this case 8, mounted on the perimeter. And those microphones are represented graphically above by this microphone array that shows 8 elements. They go through a signal transmission and storage means, and then on to a signal interpolator. But the basic concept is this. When the listener is moving their head, the different virtual ears are selected by picking the appropriate group of 2 microphones that were mounted on that cylindrical surface. And they then represent an approximation to a binaural head. They, of course, lack a pinna, which may or may not be added. And in this case, they lack a torso. But they still have the same challenge as having to have an interpolator look at, in this case, 8 channels of information and figure out what you, the listener, should be hearing. I just wanted to give some credit to Ralph Agazi and Richard Duda, who are both emeritus professors now, and they are part of this company, Dissonance, and they have done the most work I've seen in this field of explaining the trials and tribulations of doing this. If one goes to the journal of the Audio Engineering Society and searches under their names, you can find quite a bit of information on the science behind this.
Right. Robot is asking, which type of microphone is better or easier to use for recording binaural audio?
Okay, well, if you're not going to try to move things around, the best thing to use is a head or your head. There are ways that you can mount microphones in your own concha bowl, part of your ear, and put your head where you want it to be, listen to the music, get the balance the way you want, and record. Or if you don't want to be holding your head steady all the time, using a binaural head. These other techniques require a fair amount of work on the post-production side. So I make the comment that they are more difficult to use.
Mm-hmm. Robot also asked earlier, shouldn't the mannequin head be considered as the person listening? The answer is yes. And you just said you could, in fact, put microphones in your own ears
Very much
record something that way. In fact, this brings up an interesting concept that you mentioned to me before we went on the air, which is normally you would think about recording a concert, say, getting back to music, with a mannequin head or a live person sitting in the audience. But there's also the option of putting those microphones in the musician's ear. And this is a very interesting idea to me, being a musician myself. Mark Waldrop has been on this show a number of times and has said most of his recordings, all of them as far as I know, you can choose either a stage perspective, an audience perspective, or a stage perspective where you're actually on stage. And this is something of the same idea. And we have one video clip where there's is that number 7?
Lady playing the 6.
The number 6. Number 6.
Yeah, Svetlana Belsky and the Steinway piano. Right. That is very interesting. And just a quick intro. I found that if you play an instrument in which you pretty much hear the complete instrument in a logical way, 2 examples would be a xylophone, marimba, or a piano. You can make a good argument for wanting to have the microphones in the ears of the performer. And that's what that recording is of Svetlana Belsky, who is a director of piano studies at the University of Chicago. And there's a clip that you have there, number 6. Okay.
So there you're hearing it as the artist heard it while she was playing.
Right. And it turned out that after I had recorded her several different ways, she said, I like that the best. and I think it's somewhat logical. That's the way a pianist experiences the instrument and so forth.
Well, I feel somewhat the same way. When I listen to Mark Waldrop's recordings, I choose the stage perspective because I'm used to being on stage and being in an ensemble and hearing it that way. So I tend to prefer that.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead.
And there was one other example of this sort of thing that you and I talked about, which has to do with musical education. We have a clip where we've got a group of bluegrass singers that's recorded with a head with video. And simultaneously, we put a camera on each player and put binaural mics in their ears. So we were actually recording 5 pictures and 5 bits of audio at the same time. And in the demo, we give you a little bit of the bluegrass music to start with, which might be the user perspective or the viewer perspective mix. And then we switch to the ears of the guitar player and the bass player and the banjo player. And the purpose of that was to show how one could use such recordings to help musicians develop their skills in developing a ensemble of balance, which is a musical term for I play with a group and I have to balance my level, etc., with that group, and it's skewed somewhat compared to what a viewer would normally hear. And I'm sure, Scott, you can relate to that, being a horn player yourself. So that's
is that one of the clips we have to share with people here?
Yeah, let me look. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. I'm trying to look
Bluegrass.
at my notes. Yeah. Oh, it would be the one that has the. Boy, I hope I gave that to you. I guess we should.
I have number 2 and number 9 are the Wandering Boys.
Yeah. Okay. It's possible that I didn't send that to you, and so the other videos we've got here are the Bluegrass Boys. Doing, or the Wandering Boys, I should say, doing a tune, but I'm afraid I didn't give you that, Scott. I apologize for that. But
that's all right. Let's go listen to that one again. I mean, I love Bluegrass, and that was really cool. So that is a binaural recording, and I think that particular clip that we're about to play again does demonstrate the point you made a little earlier about close miking. And these guys actually move around to change the mix and the distance they are from the mic. Let's give it a listen.
That is correct.
Here the mandolin player gets up close to the left ear.
Yeah, and I would point out that there's a lot of behind-the-scenes rehearsal that went on with that, and some planning as far as the acoustic space they played in. We recorded this at the public radio station in Chicago, WBEZ, in their recording studio. And that studio was set up so that we could build basically a group of barriers around them that involved some reflective and some absorptive panels. And then through several rehearsals and playback, we helped them work the microphone, so to speak. And this was one of the best examples we've had where we had good vocal presence and a good presence of instruments. And that's the binaural process is working backwards. You do your mix when you're doing your recording rather than the other way around. And that's quite a challenge. And basically, you've got to get up close. If you can't work the group close, you get a more distant sounding, unappealing result.
I wanted to play a couple of examples. You shot some things in 3D, and we were talking about 3D earlier, and we get back to VR here at this point. And there are various ways to show 3D, one of which is what I call the dreaded anaglyph, which are those glasses that you might remember from the 50s or the 70s with a red filter in one eye and a blue filter in the other eye. And one of these examples is in fact in anaglyph. And so if you're watching the video, which I do recommend you do because that way you can hear the binaural audio, but you also might want to see if you can grab a pair of anaglyph glasses.
Right. And I would point out to the viewers that the left eye is the red glass and the right eye is the blue glass. And these are real cheap. If you don't have any, you can get them from Amazon for like 10 cents a piece, but that's kind of a small order from Amazon. But,
yeah, right. Let's take a look at number 7 is the first one.
Go ahead.
And then number 8 is, oh no, I'm in anaglyph.
How did you do that?
I don't know. The wonder of Victor the engineer. That's pretty funny. The other example is side by side. And that's number 8. And I just wanted to play that a little bit too, just to show people a different way to get 3D. You could potentially, as you told me, you could potentially see this in 3D without any glasses.
Right. Let's play it, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay.
I'm a roving gambler, I've gambled all around. If ever I meet with a deck of cards, I lay my money down. Lay my money down, lay my money down. Had not been in Frisco many more weeks than 3. I fell in love with a pretty little girl and she fell in love with me. Fell in love with me, fell in love with me.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Now, what do I want to say? JJ to the 4884 is mentioning Google Cardboard, and that is certainly another option, isn't it?
That's the preferred viewing means. Yeah, what we tried to do when we created this latest production was do examples that most everybody can afford to look at. So all of the loudspeaker versions, which we haven't talked about, and the headphone versions are all things you can do with normal setups that you might have at home. And Google glasses are inexpensive, as are 3D glasses using anaglyph. and it just shows that you can. The binaural audio is very good for all of it, and the side by side is somewhat limited to the resolution of the typical cell phone that you buy, because you are using roughly half of the display area. But that's only going to get better in time.
Yeah, exactly. As JJ to the 4884 says, glass is expensive, cardboard is cheap. That's true. Let's take just a moment to talk about binaural sound with speakers, because we've been listening on headphones mostly, and that is, I think, the best way to experience binaural audio, because you really need good isolation between your two ears in order to reproduce the sound that was recorded binaurally. But it's possible to do with speakers as well, and we have graphics 13 through 15 to show what's going on there, and you can help us understand what we're looking at.
Oh, I think we probably don't want, this goes back a ways. I think we want to go to the graphic that says 15, graphic 15. There you go. Okay,
there we go.
There you got it. Right. So for those that are watching, if you go to the website or our YouTube channel at the top, we have a tutorial on this with examples. So what we'll discuss briefly on the show here will be somewhat shortened, but you can learn more about it from our perspective by going to that YouTube video. But here's the practical side of this. People have been doing crosstalk cancellation filters for a long time. And usually it involves...
Which really, pardon me for interrupting, but usually what that means is basically when you're listening to speakers, both ears are hearing both speakers. And so you somehow want to cancel the left speaker from getting into the right ear and vice versa. That's what crosstalk cancellation means.
You're absolutely correct. So in the graphic at the right, we have what would be a typical stereo playback scheme in which the speaker spacing and your distance to them is the same, and that's traditional. But as you say, Scott, the left speaker talks not only to the left ear, but it talks to the right ear, and vice versa. Now, we know from the science of the transfer function between that left speaker and the head, that there is a predictable relationship between the sound that emanates from the speaker and the sound that would end up at your left ear or your right ear. And those transfer functions are highlighted and denoted in the left-hand graphic. So the filter, the crosstalk cancellation filter, makes use of that information to generate a signal canceling signal to feed the left speaker helps cancel out the right ear, and the right ear helps cancel out the left ear. And that type of technology has been around for a while, but we've made it practical, and we've made a version that we think is useful for people because they don't have to do anything other than set up two speakers with an equilateral triangle and listen to the music. So on this Bluegrass release that we've been playing some excerpts from, we have 6 tunes that are done in headphone binaural and the same 6 tunes in loudspeaker binaural with picture. And then we also have the headphone and the loudspeaker binaural with no video. We tried to offer all the variations that people might buy, and then as we've shown in the last 2 examples, the anaglyph, a couple of those, and a couple of side by side, and also a loudspeaker version in anaglyph. So there's something for the whole family, as they say.
Now, is this a program that people can buy?
Yes, there's our website, which is in my lower third, immersive.com. If you go to immersive.com and you click on our store, which is one of the pull downs, there you go. you will see how you can buy this. And there's two ways we're selling it: as a download anywhere in the world, or on a USB memory stick, which we are just shipping in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, that's true. And pending time, we've got a little promo that we also did. I don't know if you have time to show that, but it's the musicians talking. That's called the promotional video. That would be clip number 9. And that's a song where the Wandering Boys give the viewer their comments on what they're watching and listening to.
Okay, that's not very long. Let's take a listen.
Bluegrass music is like a bass and a guitar and a mandolin and a banjo and a fiddle and a bunch of people singing together. So there's this dummy, my friend right here, Dexter, you can see, has these ears that are different color from his facial skin tone because they have microphones inside. So you play when you stand around this guy, you know, so the mics pick up the sound the same way your ears would pick up the sound.
It felt like I was there playing the music, even though it was recorded and I was listening through headphones because of the binaural quality, the 3D quality of the sound. I could tell exactly how far away the banjo player was and exactly how far away the bass and the mandolin player was.
It's like virtual reality for audio. It seems like it's, you know, it's so detailed. You know, like whatever's like, you know, coming into your right ear, it's just like it seems like it's right there. And the same thing with the left. It's like an incredible depth of field for sound. It seems like.
This album is special. We picked a really cool bunch of traditional tunes that we worked a while on arranging, and we've been playing together for a while. And I think it's a special group of tunes. And if you're interested in bluegrass and you're looking to feel like you're really right there and kind of in the middle of this music that's happening around you in the most interactive way, this recording is going to give you that.
That is extremely cool, man. Really nice job. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
So, yeah, we've come to the end of an hour already. Can you believe it?
Wow, it doesn't seem like, I seem shorter when you're doing it.
I know. Time flies like an arrow. Fruit flies like a banana. Sorry.
That's a good one.
Sorry, couldn't help it. Well, listen, I do encourage people to go check this out on your site, immersive.com. That's IMMERSAV.com. And there's so much more to go. We're really in the infancy of this whole VR and music recording. I mean, binaural recording's been around for a long time. I even studied it in college. But I think you're still pushing the envelope there, and in some very interesting ways. So I thank you so much for being here and sharing it with us.
Well, you're quite welcome. I really enjoy this program you do, and look forward to more of this in the future.
You bet. I'll be definitely want to have you coming back. So that's Bob Schulein. His website, as I said, is Immersive, IMMERSAV.com. And Bob, thanks again.
You betcha. Good to see you again.
And you. You can always find me at avsforum.com. You can email me at scott@twit.tv, and you can follow me on Twitter at avsforum. You can always find previous episodes of Home Theater Geeks right here at twit.tv/HTG, and on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/twit Home Theater Geeks. Next next week, my guest geek has not yet been finalized, so I'm still working on that, but you can be sure it'll be somebody with lots of interesting things to say about audio and or video. So I do hope you will join me. Until then, geek out.